How is everyone? Thank you for coming to Agree to Disagree. I know we're running slightly over, but don't worry. We'll catch up on the halfway back. Proper Ryanair timing. We're always late, but we'll make it up on the way home. This is an interesting format where this could actually be brilliant or absolutely car crash. But in true Michael fashion, I love throwing challenges along our way. So what the is Agree to Disagree? We've just stolen the concept from LADbible, so it's nothing genius, nothing new. We thought, how can we bring some interesting debate into social media and get off LinkedIn for a while and actually have some proper dialogue? Not everything is black and white in social, and there's different perspectives, and we want you to hear those perspectives. Right, so first up is group one. I will read out a statement. These beautiful people will slide their glass whether they strongly agree, sit neutral on the fence, disagree, or strongly disagree, and the debate starts. Let's introduce who we have. We have Grace Andrews. We have Joel Marlinson. We have Sam Gilles. Did I get it right?
Close enough. Yeah, close enough.
And we have Dylan Patel. We practiced like for so long before this and I still got it wrong. A big welcome to our first group. So, the first statement, without further ado. LinkedIn can go itself. Agree or disagree?
Oh.
Who wants to go first?
In favour of the motion or against the motion?
Oh, let's go. Who strongly disagrees?
I mean, this is. I feel like this is maybe how the whole debate's going to go. As the one with presence on LinkedIn, I'm going to strongly disagree with that statement. Look, I think the platform. I think with all of this, I hope we go into like nuance and context, because I think when you just put your glass on the table, it does exactly what we're not trying to achieve here, which is like short form social media content. I think with LinkedIn, it's a really interesting platform. I still think it's such a phenomenal space to test writing, to network. There's no other platform really where you can connect with top people in every industry across the world at a DM away. There's not, you don't have your CMOs and your top people across the world at your fingertips on any other platform in the same way. So in terms of connection, networking, starting out, in terms of testing your thoughts and getting feedback, in terms of having zero following, starting from scratch and being able to reach 1 million people, I think it's a very unique platform. I think it's a very interesting platform. And yes, like every other platform, you get the awful people on there. You get the engagement pods. You get the painful AI slop. Of course you do. We can refer to my post from last week. It's fine if we want to put that on the table. But I do still think it provides a really unique opportunity for people to test thoughts in a different way that the short-form video-first platforms don't allow for. And I'm really glad they moved away from their promise of going big on video, because I don't think that's where it belongs. But I still hold it really fondly. I work with a lot of young students. I work with people in university, and I just think the opportunity to connect with people there in terms of access and industry access is pretty unprecedented. So I'm strongly disagreeing.
Sam, you are on the polar opposite. Lay your case.
I feel like, even though I put strongly agree against that statement...
Have I pulled you closer already?
You pulled me a little bit over here again. But can you say the statement one more time, just before I...
LinkedIn can go itself.
Because LinkedIn can go itself. I think, on many respects... I use LinkedIn a lot. I've been using it for years and years, and I think it's got a really good place in the social media ecosphere for everybody, right? I think it's great for finding a job, for thought leadership and various different things like that. But as a social media platform, I think it is probably the one that has evolved the least over the years in any meaningful, positive way. Yeah. I think places like Substack are doing such interesting things now around thought leadership and stuff like that. And to your point, I would disagree a little bit about someone can come on with like zero following and just explode. I think that's really, really hard on LinkedIn. And there's other platforms like Substack, again, and TikTok, I think, where it doesn't really matter how big your following is. You can achieve virality just by doing something quite good and interesting, and the algorithms reward it really well. It's much harder on LinkedIn, in my opinion, to grow a following from scratch now than certainly maybe it was like 5 or 6 years ago.
I think it's harder to grow a following now, for sure. The algorithm's completely changed, but I still think the way the algorithm works is more like TikTok, in that, same with TikTok, you can go on TikTok tomorrow and you could go viral, millions of views with zero following. Following is so redundant now. I still see that playing out on LinkedIn. I see people who go viral on post one, but I do think growth, it's not what, that was heyday of LinkedIn 2 years ago, I grew 100,000 followers in a year or whatever, and now it's like 20,000 the next year. But so I actually really agree with your point on the lack of transformation. And if you go into LinkedIn, they also don't have a clue what's going on. No one in that building can tell you what's coming and what's happening. So in that sense, I agree.
There's, 7 people from LinkedIn here?
I can't see. No one is in this room for me. I can't see anyone.
Jokes. Dylan, you're on Agree and Joel. You guys jump in quickly on this before we move on to our next topic.
I think it's an interesting one. If you'd asked me this question a year ago, I'd probably been closer to your side. I think the challenge for me with LinkedIn is it's increasingly become a bit of a circle jerk of people within the industry we work in, either congratulating each other on fantastic work that we know is average, exactly, or people like really deeping stuff that isn't that deep. And I think that's the challenge for me. Like you say, if you're looking for a job, LinkedIn is fantastic. It's brilliant to grow your network. It's brilliant to test content. I would agree with you that actually Substack is potentially where I would push people towards for that thing. But yeah, I think the challenge with LinkedIn is we're slaves to the algorithm, and increasingly all I'm seeing is people who think, speak, work like me, and actually I'd love to just be able to reach more people who have got more diverse thoughts and more opinions, and not just other marketers, because actually that's where I'm really keen to sort of connect with other people.
And I think for me as a platform, I like LinkedIn, but I just cannot open that app and see another thought piece on why Hailey Bieber's just brushed her teeth. There are 5 reasons why it's marketing genius. I just can't. I can't do it. But I definitely agree that, at least from my side, I've seen TikTok as a faster way to test ideas. Sure, you can go viral and you can reach loads of people, but you might not have that same community. But you get that experiment loop a lot faster on TikTok, I feel. And at least from my side, it's been a lot easier building an audience on there.
Okay, let's reset the glasses. We'll move on to topic 2. You can't trust social media professionals who can't grow their own personal accounts. Ooh, let's start with the agree. Let's go with Dylan.
Oh, I'm strongly disagree.
Oh, so you're strongly disagree?
We swapped.
Oh, you swapped?
Yeah.
Your swing. Okay, let's go. Strongly disagree.
I spend too much time doing this 9 to 5. I don't have the time to be doing it in my personal life. It doesn't mean that I'm not interested in doing it. It doesn't mean I don't love people who do it. It's a personal thing where I'm like, do you know what? I am so locked in doing work day to day for clients. I have no desire to do it for myself. For those who can do it, fantastic. It's just a personal thing where, it's not for me.
So I kind of, and this is the worst place to be, like, I'm just going to sit on the fence for this one. Because I think it does really depend. I know your statement was like, if you can't build it yourself, I'm thinking of it like if you don't have evidence that you've scaled something. And I think for a lot of people, they need, when you're starting out, being able to scale your own brand is a really great evidence. I'm just thinking like when I was hiring people, if they can scale their own brand and do it themselves, then that's great evidence for me. And I think it's harder and harder to evidence brands that you've scaled because of the amount of people who contribute to that. Like, I mean, you always say, like, Ryanair, for example, you were there for a period of time, there were so many other people there. Diver CEO, I was one of many who contributed to that. So if I went to another job interview and said, I scaled Diver CEO to the 10 million followers that it is, no one's going to believe me. So, but I can say that for my own brand. So there is something in it, especially when I'm hiring. It's really interesting. But I don't think, to your point, when you're in it, and you're building and you're in an agency and you're working for all these clients, the last thing you want to do when you get home is saying, I need to create my own content.
But what I will say is, this is kind of going to make me do this because I think the current job I'm in, I got because I spent a lot of time building my presence on LinkedIn, of all places. But and so I guess there's an element of like, everyone here to a certain extent has to do that to a certain level, right? Build their own personal brand, and that for me worked because it helped unlock opportunities for my career. But broadly, to that point, just don't have time for it outside work.
I agree, and I'm not stupid enough to believe that if you don't have 1 million followers, then you don't deserve a job in social. But ultimately, it's like proof, and especially if you have no proof of concept, if you're starting out, then at least being accountable for your own socials, showing up consistently, having that feedback loop, being able to say, I posted 10 times, this didn't work. I think oftentimes when you can often find apathy when people work in social because that you kind of just ticking boxes, getting content out there. But if you're personally accountable for content and growing your own audience and you have that proof, then I think that does serve some sort of purpose.
So personally, I think it's really, if you have grown your own community, that's great, and it really, really helps to how you deal with brands and how you build things. But having hired, I think, hundreds of people in the social media space, people that are some of the best social media professionals I've worked with who've grown really big brands on TikTok and Instagram, they have zero personal brand. and it does not interest them at all. So for me, I don't think it makes a lick of difference whether or not you got it or not if you're going to be good at it. If you can do it and you can prove it on your own personal channel, it is a great start for moving into like brand building and stuff like that. I don't think if just because you do it, it means you can't do it, or if you can't do it, you can do it and everything
I think it
else.
also demonstrates for me that you're in the tools, and I think that's essential. Like the way everything's shifting and changing at the speed of light every single day. If I can see you're playing around in your own space and you're willing to like have it as a testing playground, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think it's a great way if you're like a brand new professional and you want to break into social media, get started on your personal brand, right? That's a great entry point. But for me, it just doesn't mean that if you can't build your own personal brand, you're terrible at social. That doesn't make sense.
But then ironically, if you want to maintain a career, then sometimes you do need to like push more content, create more content on your own socials in order for people in the industry to understand that you're on the market if you're looking for a job.
Oh hell yeah, and like it makes such a big difference,
So
right?
if you've already built that presence whilst you're in your job, then you're going to make your own life easier.
Yeah.
Notice the person who's publishing more on LinkedIn. They clearly
Yeah.
want to move their job. The pile-on of brands chasing social media trends is hurting brand building more than benefiting. Ooh, a little bit over. Let's go with disagree. Joel.
It was me.
I'm so bad at
It was
this.
me.
Sam,
Disagree.
go. Sam disagrees.
Trends I think are a really tricky one with brands. Like if the pile-on and it hurting brand building, I don't see how it hurts brand building in any way. I'm really interested in where people put agree on here. But for me, a trend has its place within growing a brand at times for some people on social. It really depends on what your brand is, who you're targeting, what type of content you're doing. The biggest thing for me with brand building on social should be about, have you got something that feels recognizable, that your brand is clearly in it and that people know the content? By doing a trend, you can still have that within it as well. As long as a trend for me also showcases your brand, you understand who it is, it fits the style that you've already done, then trends have a place for me. But I don't want to say any more than that before I hear what other people have to say.
95% of the time, it's not done that way. People will just shoehorn their brand into a trend. And I kind of look back at, I know Kamala Harris wasn't very successful with this, but when she had her viral social strategy last year with the whole Brat Summer thing, one thing that she did really interestingly is that she did not use a single trending sound if it had more than 300,000 uses. And I think more brands should set these like numbered goals where if it's surpassed this level of virality, then we're not even going to bother, because you're just dumping yourself into this sea of sameness. And if you're going to hop on a trend, then you have to make it ownable.
Yeah, for me, I would say if the trend isn't in service of your strategy, it may not make sense. But at the same time, I think there's absolutely a place for trends, but nothing works in isolation, right? It's got to be part of a broader strategy that includes things that are going to drive salience and create memory structures and all the other gubbins that we talk about in this industry. So trends on their own, they're absolutely not going to drive you and build your brand. But if they're part of a bigger mix, I can absolutely see the value in it.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually we've probably all merged more into like a similar position on this one. I think it is a case of, I agree with what you're saying, but it's so often not the case. Like it's so often that a brand is jumping on the trend for the sake of jumping on it, or they've got pressure of deliverables, or they're measuring the wrong things, and maybe it does bring virality, but does it do anything to enhance the brand or the direction of the brand or the strategic goals of the brand? I'd argue more often not than it does. I think often you might get 1 million views because it's funny in the moment. Do you get a bit of cultural zeitgeist? Maybe. Is it aiding the sentiment of the brand? Is it aiding the goal of the brand, the recognition of the brand? I think there's a lot of data to suggest it doesn't, but it's an interesting one.
But you know what, interestingly, I've forgotten his name, but the guy who runs the Salmon Theory Substack, Rob, one of his Substacks had this thing about how you should treat social as your local comedy club, not your big sold-out Wembley Stadium tour. And I think that's really stuck with me, because actually more often than not, we're often looking for perfect. And I think the more you treat social like a testing ground, a playground, where you see what works, double down on it, play with it, and experiment and extrapolate, that's where you try to seek success. So unless you're playing in those places with trends and other bits, then I guess it's tricky to work out what.
Yeah, but work. Do you not think there needs to be parameters within 100%. Which to experiment? Yeah, so I think that's where my line gets drawn, because you see some brands jumping on, or some individuals jumping on trends that feel so irrelevant, and actually I find like I'm disengaging with your brand because it feels like such a dissonance. It is.
Yeah, like the sea of slop for Taylor Swift's album. Apologies for any big fans, but it was just like every other post on my feed. And I was like, there's no one adding anything to conversation now. It's noise.
But that's why you see this rise of like hashtag silence brand, where people are just like disengaged. They'll see a brand's comment and say hashtag silence brand because they're like, please stop talking. But then equally on the other side, you'll see people that will post these TikToks where it's like, I'm about to go on a plane, how many brands can comment on this? It's not because they care about the brand, it's just because they see them as bait and they know that the social manager's just desperate to get something out because that's the accomplishment of the day.
The lovely Eugene Healy coins it as attention fracking. We do anything to fight for attention on the feeds at the moment. Just one thing to interrupt and see where you can take this dialogue. For those who strongly disagree or are on the fence, if you think it works, how are you measuring it beyond the view or the impression?
I think for me, right, I think with how are you measuring social more broadly, right? How you measure a trend performing versus a piece of content that isn't a trend? Why are you measuring that on a different yardstick, really, in practice, in many respects? So I'll take some clients I can talk about. So Urban Tandoor, they're a viral restaurant, Indian restaurant and everything. So the best content we do with them are like musical parodies and TV parodies that take loads of production, and sometimes they get millions of views, sometimes hundreds of thousands. And the other day we did one thing that was the boyfriend trend, and it was the owner talking about, oh, if, you know, I can't even remember how it works anymore, but like, come in here if you hate your boyfriend, if whatever it is, like here. And it got 1.5 million views, right? But everyone on that in the comments were loving it and saying they were going to come into the restaurant, and that was a fantastic entry point for a lot of people who'd never seen the content before to then see the rest of the content we were doing on that brand as well, so seeing all the parodies and everything else. So for me, quite often the trend is a really good funnel into your good content, the rest of the stuff you're doing. If you look at what Labour did last year, to talk about politics for a minute, and like what the UK government do, I find it really interesting where they take quite serious subjects and they bring that to the fore of with a trend, because no one's going to see it otherwise. Sometimes a trend is a great entry point for the casual audience that we have out there that are never going to see your content to potentially see it. And my other thing, and this is probably quite unpopular, is we're in a massive marketing bubble. We're all in a massive marketing bubble, and we see trends all the time. We're chronically online. The majority of people, the majority of your audience barely interact with trends, barely see them. Gen Z maybe a little bit more, but they occasionally see stuff. So for many people, it's an entry point to actually see the content for the first point from a brand, is my view. But we might hate it as marketers because we're like, oh, silence brand, but actually most people don't even realise that a brand is doing anything.
But I'd say the key thing is, like, entry point is fantastic. It's what you're doing once they've entered with them.
Yes.
Are you keeping their attention? Are you moving them on to something else? I guess to go back to Michael's question, like, how are we measuring trends? I totally agree with you. We shouldn't be measuring them any differently from the rest of the work we're doing. I think we could have an argument for until the cows come home about how we effectively measure social. I'm increasingly heading towards this place of like share of social and looking at the category and the slice of the pie that you can potentially occupy in the industry you're working in, the sector that you're talking to, and measuring it that way. But I think it's such an inexact science, and it kind of blows my mind that in 2025 we still haven't really managed to find effective ways to deliver or provide ROI to clients in a way that lands with C-suite or even just your brand managers who are doing the daily.
Okay. Number 4, brands in the comment sections can build a brand and be memorable. Brands in the comment sections can build a brand and be memorable. Oh, get out of the middle, come on. Let's go with who is leaning towards disagree.
That'd be me. I think this goes back to what I said earlier, which is they can, as long as it's not the only thing the only way they're trying to build a brand. So as long as it forms part of a broader strategy that is answering a huge number of other touch points, great. But if all they're trying to do is show up in the comment section in the hope that that's going to build their brand exclusively, I think, it's not a valid strategy.
I think it only works if you've already established a clear voice outside of the comment section. So Ryanair, for example, everybody knows how they sound. So when they show up in a comment section, it makes sense. Whereas so many brands just show up like a bailiff at a party, just willing to ruin the fun.
Kleenex.
Whereas I see it more like if you're going to comment on something, then at least add something to the conversation.
100%.
And often brands do it too late. They see their competitor or they see 10 others and say, great, this is the brand playground, but nobody wants to be in the middle of a Slack group chat. They just want to see content and see other people that resonate with what they were thinking.
I always think that there's so much content out there. you don't have to, like, there's so many opportunities to establish your like brand voice in the comments. There's like infinite pieces of content that are being shared every day. Why, it's like this idea of them where all the brands gather and then everything becomes less relevant and it becomes really, really annoying and it's repelling, as to your point. So like, I always think there's so many strategic opportunities where it makes so much sense for a brand to show up in the comments. When you say can, occasionally, yes, there is a time and a place, and it's an amazing way for a brand, when they get it right, to connect directly with their consumers and meet them where they are. Like, it's amazing. It's, hey guys, we're showing up in the spaces that you are. It's what we always say, like, go to your customer, go to your client. They're there, they're showing up and it's relevant. I think the opposite of what I'd be doing is following where, you know, being the sheep, like, go be the black sheep somewhere else and like make it make sense. And there's been amazing moments where, like, there's been so many examples over the last year of it happening, and whether it's a celebrity and then the random celebrity from like your childhood shows up in the comments, and it's like this explosive moment and it does so much for their brand, and then suddenly they get all the following and it makes sense, and when it works it is so good. But I would be looking for the blank space to occupy rather than like going to the gathering of the brands, because that's where it really sucks.
So one thing I would add to that is actually just in terms of measuring the success of this, one thing that we've been doing is tracking the success of what we call proactive community management, right? So showing up into somebody else's comments and trying to find a link between the number of likes that a particular comment has got and the number of followers that we potentially got over time, and like reconciling the spikes. And actually that's been an interesting thing to do where you've done it over time. Naturally with brands, you start off commenting and you get 2 likes or 20 likes, and then you build a bit of following. Now if Guinness or someone else that we work with shows up in someone else's comments, they're going to get a fantastic number of likes, and it's the stuff that we can then directly translate to profile click-throughs and follows and stuff that shows that people are really engaged with what we're doing. But it's still an exact science.
Yeah, it's good to see you're trying to measure, because beyond the vanity, if you think of the behaviour, like, people are scrolling 20 or 30 times every time they stop in a video.
20 or 30?
Just in every binge.
Every second.
Not me.
I'm being conservative, but they're scrolling a lot and they're jumping into the comment sections, and these one-liners
200.
are making people funny. So you're going to get rewarded with a lazy like that, and you see these crop up where brands are getting hundreds of thousands of them. But we have to try and find a way, I guess, how can you measure? Like, other than that, if you're not finding uplifts, can somebody who is scrolling that much on every piece of content in every comment section remember that brand that put that 3-word funny line in that comment that got 200,000 likes? Is that effective? Not really sure.
To some extent, because if you think about like consumer behaviour, people, when they're watching a video, they're probably not even watching it in full. They've checked the comments to see what they should think about a piece of content before they've even formulated their own opinion. So I'd probably say there's more time spent actually scrolling comments than even the video itself.
Yeah, and if you think about how people consume video, right? I mean, like, you may see a brand once and completely forget it, but it's that 10th or 15th time that you've seen it in that exact style that makes you remember it. And really, with the comments, if you are playing in that space, you need to be maintaining a consistent tone of voice and doing the same thing. If Specsavers come in and go, should you go on to Specsavers on a car crash or something like that that's happening, you're going to go, yeah, I recognise that makes sense, it fits with their tone of voice. So for me, again, there is an opportunity for that to work for certain brands done in the right way. It does people off though, but also some people absolutely love it. The general public, quite often, that's why they get such crazy like ratios sometimes, right? That is the thing. Sometimes outside the bubble, a lot of people go, oh my God, this brand has commented, I can't believe it. How cool is that? And will this person reply? For some reason, people love it, but some people hate it, right? It is Marmite sometimes.
I think you need someone funny.
Yeah.
I think,
Every team needs a comedian.
I think 100%. I think it's a role
100%.
for a comedian. I think anything else is painful.
Yeah. If comedy makes sense, though, for your brand, right?
But that's why the Specsavers point, I love their reactive strategy as well, because they've made it so clear that they can show up when somebody has a flop moment or misses a moment, because you already know should have gone to Specsavers. And there was another scenario where I saw a viral video, a woman fell off her bike and then Vaseline got involved and said, grazed your knee. They made some kind of implication that their brand was relevant there. That makes sense. But when it's just like Kleenex toilet roll.
Kleenex.
Oreo or all of these other ones, Sorry, this is
Sorry if anyone here is.
If you're in the room.
I'm so glad I don't know who's in the room.
Yes, we have the CMO of Kleenex around. Employees who are the main character in content should be treated like creators when it comes to the use of their IP. I thought we'd have some disagrees. Let's go with it. Who wants to go first? Let's go with Sam.
So I think the way the world has been moving at the moment, it makes a lot of sense for this to actually happen, because there are numerous brands out there at the moment where they've almost built themselves, particularly on TikTok, in that space where the employees have become the faces of the brand. I mean, and when somebody then leaves from the brand as well, it can have such a big impact. If you look at what happened with the Washington Post guy going as well, which is quite a big thing. I really find it really interesting what Morning Brew did with Macy and everything else like there, where they've negotiated creator contracts now. I think that's such an interesting trend at the moment, because at the end of the day, you're going to have their faces on camera the whole time, and they are representatives of your brand. So really, you should be thinking about the contracts that you have that kind of set them up in that type of way. I think that's the kind of gold standard for many, many people. The reality is very, very different in practice. And I'd be really interested in what you guys think here, because we all agree.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've seen this from so many different angles. I've seen it from the angle of being the social person that's gone into a business and then gone to some of the team members and tried to film content, and they say no, quite rightly. Like, if you're working in a factory and a random social guy has come up to you and said, hey, can you shoot some content for us? You don't have to do it, it's not in your contract. So I understand from that perspective. It is also mutually beneficial if that person does want to build their own personal brand.
Yeah.
But you shouldn't be under any obligation because you're not talent
Yeah.
on paper.
Yeah. But as you say, if you're treating them like, if you're using them as you would use talent, treat them like talent, and give them. Just lost what I was going to say, but treat them like the talent. If you're paying somebody to do that, then treat them the exact same way, because they're effectively doing work for your brand and doing work in the service of your brand, and so you should be treating them.
I think to gold standard wise, like Sheerluxe have absolutely understood the model, and they were very, very early to understanding it. They were really early to using employees in their e.g. employee generated content, but their brand content is employee driven. They all have personalities, characters, people know the employees by name, and so what they've done is actually created an in-house talent agency whereby the brand deals that were coming in as for Sheerluxe are now being transitioned through into the individuals, and they are getting their cut as they deserve, in the same way that if they were creating content on the outside, they would be getting their cut. So I think that's a really smart way to do it. It incubates your talent, you're leveraging your talent, you're able to get a cut of the deal, so it's a win-win, but also those people who are the face of your brand you're retaining, and talent retention is so hard. Being able to, I think what they've done, I just look at their model of what they've created, and I think like that is what we've all got to be striving for. I mean, I was someone who built my brand within a company who wasn't necessarily set up for the direction that it was heading in, and have now, in hindsight, sort of set up much better for it. So I think it's a conversation. It's got to be within contracts. It's got to be as if they are creators, as if they are talent. It's a two-way conversation. It works so well for the brand. It works so well for the creator when done correctly for the talent. So I think it's a messy area that's emerging and that people are figuring out. But I do think Sheerluxe were really early to understanding how it's got to work, and it's just that. It's two-way, It's not, you're both benefiting, let's make that, and to your point on IP, like that's a really interesting conversation, because right now I don't think anyone's nailed that.
Yeah, I think it was the Washington Post with Dave Jorgensen, like at some point a bit like Macy in Morning Brew, they started to collab with their individual accounts to start building and going, this is the human. And somebody referred to it before as treating them almost like a late night show host, because at some point they're going to leave, which is a question I was going to bring. How do you future-proof it if one or two become the main character and then they leave?
Well, what Sheerluxe did quite brilliantly is that they don't just feature one employee, so they've diversified it. So if one of the employees leaves tomorrow, then the whole thing doesn't fall flat. And I'm sure we'll talk about this, but that's one of the benefits to employee-generated content being balanced with founder-led, because you might have one or two founders, but you might have 20 employees that you can distribute that spotlight on. But we also have to address the elephant in the room, which is that most brands don't like the idea of their employees being treated as creators, because then they lose some element of control over their voice, over what they say about the company, the fear that they might be poached by a competitor. Whereas ironically, the more that you nurture your talent and the people that are in your company, the more they want to stay.
100%.
And would you rather them not build their brand at your company than build them at a competitor's company?
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's always the case. If they're going to build it, like you want them to be building it within your walls and amplifying your brand for you and
100%.
within that space. So, but I agree. I think a lot of companies are still terrified of it. It's something I talk about on LinkedIn quite a lot, and it causes like real stir and debate every single time. Like there's a real mix of opinions on whether it's something people want to pursue or not. But I think what we're seeing is a lot more founders are recognizing that when they build their brand, they gain traction and it's a nice funnel into the business. Employees can do that on such an incredible scale with their own tone of voice, with their own interesting opinions, and they do truly become ambassadors for the brand. But I think it has to happen within parameters. So I know at Flight there's parameters with which you can operate within, and you become incentivized and rewarded based on what you're creating. And I think it's a fun part for those who are interested, and if you're not, all good.
When it's strategic, it makes sense. Do you feel that a lot of brands are defaulting to using employees because of lack of resource budget to actually do bigger, better things that might make sense?
Yes, but I do think employees have built-in credibility. So if you're selling like a beauty product, instead of just briefing an influencer who doesn't really know about your product, probably doesn't really care, is just trying to, not in all cases, but is just going to get the content out and not have that real touch and insight on how it's developed. Your employees, they work in the business, they understand it, they know how it was made, so they can show up with that element of expertise. Whereas I understand if you're a smaller brand, you're probably thinking, well, we've already got people in the office, so let's just get them to do it.
There's also, I guess, the element of like, and I say this as a geriatric millennial who is very, very confident in my age, but I think there's absolutely a generation of digital natives who've grown up where this kind of thing is completely natural to them, and they're more than happy to do it, and they want to do it, and it's almost like the kind of thing where it gives them the opportunity to stretch their legs? No, stretch their something.
Creative muscles.
Yeah, there you go, creative muscles, and it's the kind of thing that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do outside of work. So it's as you say, if there's somebody who's got real talent for it and they're showing a real knack for it, then absolutely nurture them, get them excited, and get them to be that face of your brand. But like you say, hedge your bets, spread the love, because the worst thing you do is put all your money in one person.
Yeah. For me, it's an authenticity thing for a lot of brands that I speak to. Sometimes they can be reluctant to use existing creators or actors because they're not representatives of their brand, and that can become a challenge for them. So sometimes the employee side is actually the perfect balance for them. However, then it runs into all the issues about, are they going to stay, are they good on camera? We've worked with a lot of public service companies that, my God, they really struggle with that thing, and that takes a lot of time to build and unlock. And for many brands, that's just really, really tricky. Mm-hmm. I think like with the Sheer Luxe and everything else like that, they have become one of the gold standard companies for that one, but I guess they never started out like that, did they? Right? And for a lot of brands and a lot of people in brands, they might want to come in with like a creator contract in mind, but you're nobody at that point, right? So it's really hard to negotiate. So sometimes you have to almost just get involved and do it and build the personal brand within the brand, like Inception thing for brand owning here, and then you can negotiate that. And that really is the reality in some respects. I do think people should be rewarded for it though, and they shouldn't have to be forced to it. That's like a really very clear point really to me.
And how incredible is it to see someone like Zara from Duolingo her absolute career take off as a result of being able to build a brand within the space that she was in, and being able to leave with these like headline profile pieces being written by like big mainstream like news publications about a social media manager, and then going on to being sort of very senior over at DoorDash, I think is a really cool to be able to watch that happen from the other side of it as well. Like the opportunities that are then there at the right time. Yeah. Obviously it's a challenge for retention, but your A players are going to leave anyway. Yeah. So I always think it's really interesting to see that what it's enabling, and the I guess the credibility that's being given to social, which I think has been missing for a while as well.
And I think from the audience's perspective, there is this increasing appetite to understand who is behind the content. So whenever a brand's content goes viral, it's always, who is the social media manager behind this? I know there's the whole Gen Z intern meme, which I just won't give enough airtime to, but you'll see comments like, who's the admin, which social media manager did this, the team deserves a raise. And I feel like that's just a sign that people do want to see the team, even if it's in a combination with influencers.
What practices are you putting in place? We've got a good mix of former kind of brand insiders, people working with other kind of smaller shops with creators, and we've got agency people. What rewards are you putting in place for employees getting in front of?
I can answer one of those. I can't say who, but we have one particular person who works on the brand, and they have a specific creator contract and a normal contract as well. Wow. That it doesn't happen with every person, and that's because they've become quite a big representative for a brand. Can't say who, but with other companies I work with, I know that they don't necessarily reward them at all in any way more than just being employed, which is just, I guess, a quirk of their business. Perhaps they're a little bit small. There's businesses I spoke to as well, like we don't work with them, but do you remember Merchant's Fish and Chip Shop, the Chip Shop Diva?
Yeah.
I spoke to the owner as it was kicking off, and he was basically discovering that the Chip Shop Diva was then getting management. And what was he having to do about the whole thing? And he then now has like a separate contract, I think, with her around creating content for them and actually working in the chip shop. So you do get these moments where things just kick off and become and result in you having to renegotiate that
You've got to
contract.
play catch up, but the point as long as you're catching up and not leaving it to chance, I think that's the main thing. Right?
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's like build it and they come quite often. Setting it up from scratch is really, really tricky unless you're working with an influencer, somebody who's already got a profile or who is actually already like a relatively big talent person.
Yeah, I don't know an example that, other than maybe the Sherlock's, which I know some people even within that world don't agree. Like within Sherlock's, like, no, we don't love how this works with the selected talent and how it works. But like, I don't think there is one blueprint that I could look to where I'm like, yeah, those guys have absolutely nailed it. Like, I think it's still so emerging and so new and so terrifying to so many big teams and boards and C-suites that they're still figuring it out. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space because there's such a surge of it. Brands are understanding the benefit. The employees are looking to be able to build a brand somewhere. So we've got to meet everyone in the middle at some point. And maybe it is a secondary contract. Maybe it is just hiring specifically people to be content creators and not expecting it of your employees. I don't know. I think it's so nuanced, and every industry and every business has got to look at it differently.
I mean, that's the route we're going down. We're very much like looking to build out a separate function of content creators who are very clear on what their role is. Everything's contracted very clearly. Because then it just doesn't put the onus on social media managers and other people who often feel the need to do that, especially when you're in a more junior role and you feel like you can't say no, or you feel like you've got to do things to progress your career. Being able to split those roles out and say, no, you've got a very clearly defined role, and this person here is the content creator, and they know what they signed up for, just makes things much easier.
I would like to see a very special type of talent agency that only signs employees. So instead of a talent agency that just hires influencers, like, I know Sherlock's do it in-house, but imagine if there was an agency that only hires like employees at Sherlock's or employees at Tesco's or M&S, the ones that specifically go viral, and then could also aid with them moving roles, whatever that looked like.
So the guys from Morning Brew, two of the early founders have left to build an agency that's only for, they've called them knowledge creators, so which is a very like American version of the same thing that we're talking about. Which I think is really interesting. So they're only wanting to work with people who either within employment who are like employee ambassadors or are very, very specific within their industry and niche as like marketing experts or women's health expert or whatever, not necessarily just your influencers. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
It's a sticky time because if you are working in a social media manager role, whether it's in-house at a brand or an agency, and you are actually making content and being the front, and you see the influencer team and the partnerships team signing contracts with influencers who are getting either on par the same reach, or you might be even outperforming their content, and you're still only getting a salary, that's a scary situation, and it is a big topic that's going to need to be solved, and we need to get to it because there are so many people probably in the room here who are doing that, and some people in agencies doing it for multiple brands. Do you feel you're being paid fairly? We're going to find out in the salary survey a bit later. In this career, in this role, there's a time that businesses started to think about this. I think they're scared because the investment they're going to have to put on this, the talent that is in these teams going forward, and the amount of impact that they have and the future that they have is quite a scary space where salaries are going to have to increase, they're going to have to get a slice of the pie, or you're going to have to pay them extra bonuses for delivering certain performance if they become the front of the brand. We've got one more for this group, which is good. You can be a founder and build a brand on social without being the face.
Without being the face, not sure. Without being the voice, not quite. Because even if you look at like the PayPal CEO, head of content role that they were hiring for in the US, which was paying significantly, all of these big multinational companies that are now hiring people to ghostwrite for their CEO. It's not because the CEO has lots to say all of a sudden. It's because there's sudden appetite for the people that are leading the companies. And going back to what we were talking about with employee content, one way you can bring that voice through is through employees. But there's more interest, especially with bigger multinational companies that are faceless by nature. You're not really going to get that human touch from a company that has 50 offices in the world. For them to have employees creating content for them and not the founder, that creates a little bit of a risk for them in terms of how you relate to them as a brand.
I was speaking to a brand the other day called TLDV. I don't know if you know them, B2B like meeting recorder. And there's a guy on there called Ian Evans, and he does a lot of the content, and there's 2 other content creators. And he was basically hired along with 2 other people because the founder did not want to be in the content at all. And he's quite a smart guy, but he was very much like, I don't want to be anywhere near that content. And they hired Ian and a couple of other people, basically originally as freelancers, and then they brought them as full-time employees. And they've now got really big on TikTok, really big on Instagram. They built a lot of their brand around TikTok, Instagram, and LinkedIn. They have a really good writer called Renee who does a lot of their content. You've probably seen her. But the CEO is pretty faceless in terms of social media on that side. And I think that's a really good example of a relatively new brand in a different space who've used employees to basically build the brand without the founder. And Ian was even telling me that actually he was like, I wish the founder would be on there because it would be a lot easier because they can speak to the brand in a way that they can't as well. But over time, they've managed to become actually so associated with the brand that people just assume that he's the CEO and he's just a content creator. So for me, that's a really good example. I think founder-led brands really have a distinct advantage, though, at times. It helps them massively. There's so many great examples of founder-led brands, but I don't think you can only build if you have your founder at the front and centre.
I'd agree, because also, there's just the fact that, the example you just mentioned, the founder didn't want to be in front of the camera. There's also plenty of founders who are just terrible in front of a camera.
Oh my God, yeah.
A liability, and you haven't been PR. There's one right here. So I think for that reason alone, it's not necessary to have your founder as the face of your brand. Because God knows we've probably encountered founders who probably shouldn't have been the faces of their brands, and yet ended up being so.
Look, I work with, like my whole ethos is around personal branding and founder-led content. I'm super passionate about it, but I'm also really passionate about it being one of your marketing channels and one route to fast-track growth. For sure, if I was encouraging and working with a small business in 2025 and 6 or whatever, and we were looking at the options for how they're going to build and scale, I would say to them, look, if we can start developing your brand, that's one way to fast track your growth, for sure. You only have to look at the Sunday Times fastest growing businesses from this year, look at the top 7, every single one of them is a founder-led, content-led driven brand. Every single one of them. So you look at all of those and you go, okay, there's obviously something going on here. Obviously, you probably have an advantage to your point if you do it. Is it the only way? Absolutely not. I look at, and I have no idea who this room is in this room, so I'm probably speaking to their teams, but I always think about Free Soul. Free Soul is a women's health brand. Nobody knows that that's founded by a man. Absolutely nobody. Exactly. Nobody knows it's founded by a man. An incredible man who is very, very passionate for various reasons about women's health, and he works with his family and with his mother, and the senior leadership team are fairly female. It's a very female-driven brand and very heavy brand. They've been hugely successful. You will never, ever see that founder or CEO's face on any form of comms. You can't find it on the website. You'd have to really go digging to find that. So can brands be successful without it? Of course. Look at some of the fastest growing tech companies right now. You won't see their face. You know Sam Altman. You don't know anyone else. We don't know the founders. We don't know the faces. Is it beneficial in like a consumer-facing brand to be fun and interesting to Gen Z in 2025? Yeah, of course. It's fun, it's cool. You see the Salt founders, they're my good friends. They're killing it because they've got direct communication with their audience. There's loads of advantages there. It is one of your channels, one of your marketing channels, and there are so many options out there. I have so often people come to me and they're like, I really hate being in front of a camera, I don't want to do it, I just want to be in the business, then please do not go and get in front of a camera, because your audience are going to be able to see that you don't want to be there. And it's not a non-negotiable. I think there's huge advantages to it. I think you probably have to work harder if you don't go down that route, but you absolutely can build a business without being founder driven.
I'm not suggesting it's the only way, but with the Free Soul example, that could be a scandal waiting to happen. So let's say, it's not with that example, but let's say there's a black hair care brand, and then people find out that it's actually not owned by a black person. Then that brand has to do all of the brand building from scratch to prove their credentials, to prove that they understand the formulation. It's happened with Cantu specifically. So in that way, you're kind of ensuring that people genuinely believe and buy into the brand from the beginning, but I'm not suggesting that it's the only way you do it. And also, we're in an interesting place where content creators are becoming CEOs and CEOs are becoming content creators. You look at someone like Emma Greed, who's already a very successful entrepreneur, suddenly now doing Getting Ready With Me's. And that's not for no reason, it's because there's deliberate value in it. And also from the entrepreneur's perspective, it's another revenue stream. So you don't have to rely on, if you're working in a retail business, you don't have to rely on tough dividends and times being tough within your business. You can also generate buzz and have a separate source of income from that.
The over-reliance makes it trickier too when you want to step away or you're about to sell too.
Or investors in general. I've worked with a lot of businesses who've come to Dragon's Den who are very, very founder reliant, and investment becomes really challenging because the risk is so huge if they're stepping away and they're so reliant on the founder. There's got to be a stage at all businesses where the founder has got to be able to step away and it's got to live without them. But I agree in so many ways. I love founder-led brands. I'm very passionate about them. It's the industry I'm working in, but it can't be the only way.
Yeah, because you see with Sean Evans with Hot Ones, the valuation of Sean Evans with Hot Ones is 70-80 million. If he doesn't come with a package, the price completely drops, so you're not going to get the money that you need. You saw Molly May make a really conscious public decision too on the Maybe brand. She purposely said she's not going to be the face of the brand because she wants the brand to live on so she can move on and hopefully make a lot of wedge when it comes to selling it too. Right, we're going to wrap up here and we're going to wrap up Group 1. So first of all, can we get a round of applause for the guys in Group 1?